Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first of the Spectrum Scale User Group events of 2022. My name is Simon Thompson. I've been running the user group for a number of years, and as many people know, I'm stepping down from doing that. So I'd like to introduce a new host today for the user group. Paul Tomlinson is joining us. He's agreed to support running the user group, various different events. Paul's been involved in the user group for a long time as an attendee, and he told me he's been using GPFS since version 1.1. Which is a lot longer than me. So I'm going to hand over to Paul to pick up today's webinar. Thanks, Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning from wherever you are. As Simon said, welcome to the first Spectrum Scale User Group for 2022. This is day one of day two. So we have two talks today. There is an update on Spectrum Scale 512, and then there's a change to the agenda, unfortunately, because the main person, Aaron, unfortunately couldn't make the talk today, so we have changed it to a presentation by Jay, which is on multi-connection performance. So I'm sure that'll be a fascinating discussion for us. As we go through the talks today, there's the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screens. Feel free to add questions into there. They will either be answered as we go along or at the end, and there will be time for comments and discussions at the end of each talk. At this point, once again, thank you for joining. I'll hand over to Chris for the first presentation.
Sure, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, right? Again, my name is Chris Maestas here, an executive architect here at IBM. It's been a while since we got to last see each other. Today's talk is on Spectrum Scale version 512, so we're kind of giving you an update on that. As always, right, you know, these are digital events. We've had some great talks in the past that have been presented. There's our Spectrum Scale website. They're all there and recorded. If you ever want to join the group, this is led by the community, by users, you know, partners, and IBM really tries to participate in this environment. We do have an email and Slack community. You can see the URL to join there below. It's not a replacement to ask, you know, a support request in terms of what actually you're looking to do. And again, it's really independent, really trying to help you to develop the events. Again, you sort of heard from Paul and Simon, there's a transition of leads, right? That's what the user community is all about, changing from other users that want to go on and, you know, do new things. And again, this is, I think, great to sort of see this change that's going on in the user group community. And again, there's many past talks that we presented on before that, again, you can welcome to see a lot of these digital events that we've talked. So today, again, it's Chris, I'm here. Loads of thanks, you know, usually at another partner in crime, and Nikhil has actually helped step up and got a lot of this deck going, you know, working with the development team and getting feedback and sort of getting that there. So loads of thanks to sort of, you know, Nikhil sort of helping out as we were sort of doing these things. As always, you'll hear opinions from, you know, IBMers, right? These are our personal opinions, not speaking on behalf of IBM fully. We do have development, you know, as panelists. We do have our product manager, Tom O'Brien, is here as well, right? And, you know, to sort of help, you know, answer any of the questions. So again, you know, put your questions in the chat. We'll take a look at that. I'll try to sort of scan through, and if not, the team's good at making sure that I get interrupted, and we'll address any of the questions that you do have in terms of that. So 512, what are the featured updates? I think we've been trying to do a good job at talking to the new things, right? What are kind of the highlights of this release? So again, continued enhancement and integration for deployment with containerization. We announced last year, essentially, it's last year now, we're not this year, a new kind of a front in the Spectrum family, Spectrum Fusion. We have hardware and we have software kind of defined storage, you know, where it's going to use Spectrum Scale, what we've been talking about the past couple of years, container storage interface, container native storage access, so CSI, CNSA, and sort of building those along with OpenShift technology, you know, OpenShift Compute Platform, OCP, and other technologies as well. So again, the enhancements we've been doing to Spectrum Scale within the CSI and CNSA frameworks, are being used in other frameworks like Spectrum Fusion now as well. Another featured update, high performance object support. So again, we did a technical preview in December, and we did get it out the door, I believe. But again, we have our next generation protocol stack in sort of how we're going to be addressing that as well. So again, high performance object is sort of a new way of addressing some of the limitations we had seen with some of the Swift stack, but again, we'll talk a little bit about that. GPU direct storage, general availability. So again, working with NVIDIA, we came out at GTC, did some talks, alongside them and showed how GPU direct storage works with Spectrum Scale. Great talk tomorrow on this, so you should attend that. And continued enhancing, the reliability, monitoring, security with active file management, which is going to get, a bigger role, right, in what we'll be able to virtualize unstructured data storage, right, from NFS targets, from S3 targets, other Spectrum Scale kind of environments. So the use cases that we have in object, disaster recovery scenarios, right, we're trying to make sure that the way we're monitoring, the way the security is done, the reliability aspects are continued to be worked on in each release. Now, I actually had to take a step back this morning because I was like, yeah, let's see, it was March of 2021. No, it was 2020. So 2 years ago, right? It's actually been 2 years. We announced essentially a new way of how we were doing the Spectrum Scale release plan. So that was Spectrum Scale 505. So again, we said we're going to come out with this new extended update support release, or again, for Ubuntu users, long-term support. Red Hat sort of used this methodology as well. And we're going to do a better job at aligning these long-term, support style releases, EUS, extended update support, in terms of the operating systems that are out there, and making sure that you could, as a user, if you're using Spectrum Scale technology, you can use this for an extended period of time and have a reliable set of features. You're not sort of bringing new features in as well. It's basically stabilized, and we're going to sort of cadence with security fixes and whatnot. Some feature functionality, but not too much. Then we had our 510, 511 type of releases, where we introduced active file management with S3. We introduced multiple connections over TCP/IP, MCOT. So, these new features were getting kind of put into these other point releases, and we did a good job at, March was the 505. In the fall, we did the 510. Last March, we talked about 511. And this past fall, and I was able to attend supercomputing with a lot of good colleagues of mine, and we talked about 512. So 512, in terms of that cadence, the way we were doing the last 2 years, was the next extended update support release, which kind of meant, 505, right? We're going to be sunsetting it. So probably, again, it's coming up on 2 years, this March, April kind of time frame. And again, we released the previous EUS update. It's been 2 years now. And again, this happened this last fall. So for 2 years, 512 is going to be the extended update support release. So essentially, that's kind of that was the release plan that we had 2 years ago. The good news is we stuck by it. We didn't change it, too much. And we basically sort of have been cadencing, the team, that the product management, the development, sort of making sure that we met these particular deadlines. That said, it's been 2 years. So we've kind of been, seeing what's been happening over time, trying to think about, some of you are asking about newer features faster, right? So things like CSI and CNSA, we started to see updates into that 2 or 3 times, I think, since supercomputing in November. We've seen a couple of updates in these container kind of realms, right? So Spectrum Scale, we sort of took a step back and we're sort of addressing, could we have more than 2 releases a year? Still keeping in mind that there's an extended update support release that's going to be there for you for 2 years, 2 full years, before you even have to think about doing a rolling upgrade to another release. So again, really, addressing the request for quarterly updates to bring new features out sooner, right? So you can do this technology preview of a high performance object. We can get that out there. We can kind of shake it out in another quarter release, get newer features there. Maybe we discovered something with, MCOT. We sort of do some more monitoring or some new kind of features of that. Maybe we work on, memory claim space, or, some of the questions that we've seen in the mailing list about, online MFSFCK kind of environments, right? So this now gives us the ability to think about, instead of twice a year, let's cadence to these smaller releases every quarter, right? We can hit the dial on that. And when something's hot, when we want to work on it, we can sort of get that in the queue and get that out for that quarterly release as tech preview, stabilization of the effort of that particular feature, and get that out there. So again, we still have, again, the extended update support release. I want to sort of stress that's there for long-term type of support. But you have the ability now to look at these other point releases that are going to be a little bit faster. So you sort of, again, I always tell people, if you were, again, I used to run Red Hat, but, I also liked Ubuntu and sort of what it was doing. But at Ubuntu would sort of have these smaller releases and then a long-term support release, and it would, basically choose, what do you want to do? Very similar kind of concept. So lots of these smaller kinds of releases so you can get the latest and greatest. Maybe you got a new system, a new chip, a new, hardware. You want to sort of see how that's going to work. We can sort of work with you in that kind of beta program, that we have to do that. So you're going to, again, still see the EUS release that's out there, and then a lot of these point releases that are there. And it's, again, if you have questions about this, feel free to, put them in the chat, put them in to contact us in how this is actually working. But we talked about this at Supercomputing. It, as you can imagine, generated a lot of feedback for us and sort of thinking about how we want to structure this. But again, I'm happy to sort of see the ability to bring newer types of feature functionality into the product, faster. This gives us that ability where we're not waiting 6 months before the next one sort of, next window comes out as well. So that's a new shift. So again, we were good at taking it back to where we were at before. We were good 2 years, right? We sort of followed this plan. We took it upon ourselves to reevaluate how that's been done. Now we'll be able to address, again, new features, bring them out sooner in these smaller types of releases. Another kind of side note, right? So again, you sort of see the blue, right? The blue means that's basically where maybe you will see maybe one PTF, in the particular release. And that's these smaller kinds of things that are sort of seeing here on the screen. The thing that I, do like to just tell folks, right? Again, if you want, constant updates, try to get to make sure you're on an EOS type of release. If you get to these smaller releases, again, they're just like before, even before we were doing these quarterly, 5.11, 5.10, right? They're basically no more PTFs for 5.10 or no more PTFs for 5.11. That's the way the structure was done. If you want PTFs, you're going to go to 5.12. That's your next EOS type of release. So just kind of that mental note. What release am I on? Yes, I know we used to do this question all of the time. Who's on 3.5? Who's on 4.1? Who's on 4.2? And again, yes, we're still seeing folks that are out there on 5.04, 5.02, 5.03. Again, we do our best from a support standpoint to sort of try to make sure we can address the issue at hand. But the strong recommendation, right, is to get onto a 5.0, an EOS type of release or stay up to date with the releases. And that said, we've been doing a lot to enhance that kind of upgrade process. We've released in 5.1.1 Ansible playbooks to be able to do easier upgrades of the environment. This went into some of the containerization efforts that we were doing, but that also went into our installation toolkit. And yes, some of you have asked out there, I want to do RPM-IVH or, apt-get install, the deb package. You can still do that, but again, when you sort of want to just have things roll to the next release, all of that's still going to happen, business as usual. But again, we're trying to make it easier to get to a newer release. We're trying to give you tools and frameworks that are open source, that we're releasing to open source, that you can use as well in your environments for kind of maintaining releases as well. So that's kind of where we're going. So that's the deployment schedule. What else is going on again in the product? container native storage access. This sort of, this is kind of a layer that works with OpenShift. In Spectrum Fusion, for example, it allows you to deploy Spectrum scale client and server technology, right? The NSD client and the NSD server within that whole framework. The container native storage access layer really allows us to run Spectrum scale in an OCP environment, that Spectrum scale NSD client. And again, this is running with Red Hat Core OS worker nodes, where you're not really installing, whatever, willy-nilly, whatever package you sort of want. It's sort of out there. There's been lots of updates. I talked about this again in November. There was it was a 5.1.1.4 update. Well, since then, since November, we have had a newer update of 5.1.2.1. So again, we've been doing more updates within this. Some of the things that are kind of highlighting here, the OpenShift container platform, there's a product, I'll tell you what, that releases pretty often, right? So they came out with 4.9. They came out with an EUS style release as well, which I believe is the evens are the long-term support on OCP, and the odds are not. But again, people are running 4.7, 4.8, 4.9. So we want to make sure the container native storage access layer is there as well. We've had a great talk actually by Laura and team that's been recorded as a digital talk. I invite you to check that out. She walked through how you can access the CNSA images in the container registry. Harold Saib, I sort of talked a little bit about, some of the DR types of use cases with that. So lots of great talks there. Some of the big news, right? Support for data at rest encryption. So essentially having encryption at the storage layer, making sure you're running in CNSA, that is sort of there. And then the other thing that we wanted to make sure happened in terms of now we're going to be cadencing to smaller releases, rolling upgrade, or more quarterly releases, rolling upgrades of IBM Spectrum scale. So making sure you can sort of do that as well. Finally, again, you got some things like Grafana support. This CNSA access layer, right? IBM can run it on Z and Power, but also on x86. But that, like I said, it's just more of a note and a testament to what software-defined storage really is, right? Architecture independence, hardware independence, being able to sort of take something like OpenShift and be independent about where you're running it as well, which will be interesting for cloud, different hardware environments as well. Direct attachment for storage from x86 and Power servers, and then as well as figuring out quorum selection within the Kubernetes topology awareness. If you need to take a real quick refresher, what container native storage access really is again, you can have your Spectrum scale storage. Maybe it's an Elastic Storage System 3200 that's sort of providing a file system that you'll do a multi-cluster mount, a cross-cluster mount. You're going to have that set up here within this environment that has the container storage interface operator. It has all of these containerized applications of Spectrum scale, the CSI plugin, health and monitoring, the GUI, that environment running on a Core OS environment with OCP. That basically is running Spectrum scale as a client cluster containerized that's mounting that storage from the ESS, for example, and having that available to run and be and have those applications that are containerized access that storage as the classic CSI model of a persistent volume container claim. That's sort of out there as well. Lots of C's that we're using here. So again, support for storage cluster encryption. So again, how will you do that? You're going to have a key server. Again, the way that encryption works in Spectrum scale. So you'll access that encrypted data with a remote bounded file system. So the encryption key you're going to have from one, as you can imagine, it is going to have to be able to talk to the key server, do the key exchange. All of that has been, nicely set up within the OCP type of environment to sort of set this kind of key exchange that's going up as well. I will do, again, kind of a note because some folks have asked, and I got caught around this as well. This is encryption of data at rest. This is not encryption on the wire that's going on. So in Spectrum scale, not CNSA, that actually does encryption on the wire, NIST and FIPS. But again, the way that we're doing the encryption here and again, these are small baby steps, right? First step is support encryption at rest with CNSA. Check the box. We've done that. Showed you exactly how you can sort of do that there. The other thing in a containerized type of environment is how can you do things like active file management? How can you do things like compression? How can you do things like storage sharing? So everything you do, one of the things that we try to do with Spectrum Scale, whatever type of environment I'm running, in a cloud, in a container, as virtual machines, in bare metal environments, what are the limitations that we know we need to test, and what do we sort of want to sort of bring to light sooner? So again, taking back to that quarterly release kind of schedule, where if there's something that we know needs to be tested and vetted, we can sort of bring that out a lot sooner. So AFM caching, compression, storage tiering within that containerized environment, now making you have that support availability. Now the container storage interface, CSI, right? So again, you sort of have to think of it like CNSA, that's all around OpenShift and what's going on there right now. CSI, it works on Kubernetes and it works on OpenShift. So it doesn't really care as to what the end kind of environment is there. But of course, you know, we want to make sure that we've tested OpenShift versions, Kubernetes versions here as well. And since November, we've done improvements to the CSI driver. We're now at 2.4.0. So again, we're essentially talking to that kind of environment to make sure we can, you know, do newer features, support for liveliness probe in the driver pods, being able to upgrade your versions of CSI easily. And again, CSI volume cloning was some of the bigger news, right? Being able to clone, you'll sort of see some of the things we're trying to do around backups within containers and Spectrum Protect Plus that's sort of out there. And finally, having that CSI volume be expanded, you know, after the volume's already been created. So I basically provided access. I want to, increase the amount of data that's going to be provisioned. Can that sort of be done within Spectrum Scale? And again, 5.1.1.2 and higher. And this is a little bit of that preview. Again, having to be able to do the container, management. How am I going to do snapshotting as well in this environment? So container backup and restore support. You want to be able to use things like what we have from IBM, Spectrum Protect Plus, running in the CNSA kind of environment. So we can actually use CSI for taking the snapshots to create the backup. And then for restores, use the CSI to create a PVC, a persistent volume claim, where the restore is going to be done. So this is kind of the things we've been doing. We got a nice blog that's out there that will give you, walk you through this type of environment. So when it comes to things outside of containers, but built on what we've been doing in containers, that's really what we've been doing with high performance object. So, we've had the ability to ingest with HDFS. We've had the ability to do POSIX and GPU direct support. Storage is sort of working through that layer, doing NFS, doing SMB that's out there, as well as, the CSI, CNSA environment. So high performance object, we're trying to build upon what we did was, we'll sort of see some of the in the technology preview, and as we sort of bring it to a production release this quarter, you'll sort of see it's using the CSI, CNSA type mentality of thinking and bringing that out as well. So being able to quickly use the OpenShift compute platform, OCP, and have an S3, environment that's exposed, so you can have that's going to talk to Spectrum Scale storage on the other end. So how does this kind of look, right? So this is now requiring 5.1.2.1, so the PTF of 5.1.2, data management edition, data access edition, having the Elastic Storage System on that as well. OpenShift, 4.9 that's out there. CNSA and CSI are at their latest levels as well. And again, really, we were testing on Elastic Storage System 3200 type of systems, so or 3000, 3200 systems, NVMe-based storage. We wanted to really see what is high-performance object going to do from this kind of layer, what the MVP baseline can reach. So with 3, what we call data access nodes that you basically are doing, they can connect to that within running in OpenShift, talking to Spectrum Scale via CNSA and sort of talking to the end storage, that they can push 40 gigabytes a second. So that's kind of the MVP baseline. We do have advanced S3 capabilities on the roadmap for encryption, for select, for versioning, object lock. And again, the team's doing a really good job. You know, I think Kira may or may not be here, but she's the product manager that will sort of talk to how this is, you know, leading and sort of going through within the motions as well. So Kira and Tom are doing a great job on that in terms of working with development, with beta access that's out there. This is a tech preview right now. And again, you can sort of see how we're thinking about redoing S3 access to spectrum scale. GPU direct storage, again, I'm not going to sort of steal a lot of the thunder for tomorrow's talk. So GPU direct storage, plain and simple, you're not using the CPU to make access, you know, make a read or a write call to the storage device. So reads, check the box. We know that we have a really good environment on that. Tune into the talk tomorrow for, you know, what kind of testing we've done, the methodology as well, and where we're going with GPU direct storage. And, you know, just kind of a note, understanding how to use GPU direct storage in your requirements. We do have those documented changes from IBM and from NVIDIA. You can always mail scale at us.ibm.com. You know, see the CUDA release, Spectrum Scale 512, the OFED fabric that you'll be doing, as well as the GPUs that are supported as well. From the BDNA, or Big Data and Analytics, we've been working with Cloudera, continue to work with Cloudera on their Cloudera data platform, private cloud base, being certified with that, and, you know, making sure that their transparency layer is working. We've actually been working with a lot of these data lake modernization efforts. Last year, sort of being involved with transitioning from Hortonworks over to Cloudera or open source kind of environments, making sure that that's easy to deploy. We've, again, had those Ansible playbooks, that whole framework. We committed those changes for deploying cluster export services to have the name node service run easy in that environment. And again, kind of working a little bit on improving performance within the transparency layer and how we're sort of requesting data from the, you know, the data node, request processing. And again, you can see we're trying to document the best practices for performance options here as well. In terms of security and reliability, again, the way that we're communicating the RPCs, making sure that they're, you know, not showing anything they do, showing the correct creation time, for example, and then, you know, support with other things like MPAC. So you want to sort of deploy a, you know, or upgrade a single or multiple HDFS configurations. You can use that environment with Ambari to deploy multiple namespaces. And then how can you decommission nodes or sort of grow and change nodes? That's sort of been working there as well. From an active file management, lots of great work run into it last year. I mean, I think at the end of 2020, not 2021, I sort of went into, you know, working with the development team on a lot of AFM challenges. And what we sort of essentially did, right, it did a lot of good work for performance updates, looking at, instead of NFS version 3 as a primary protocol for, you know, these WAN kind of connections, could we use NFS version 4 in the environment? And I know probably in our developer, you know, our panel, maybe we'll talk later, we're looking at other technologies or customers interested in working with us in other partners we're looking at for better AFM compression over the wire, right? So we have some partners we're working on there, like Vicinity. But NFS version 4, we're changing from version 3 to version 4, you know, making things a little bit easier. And then also, to, you know, as you're talking to a data store, you know, I did a solution with NFS v3, and we're talking to an Isilon system a while back, and it wasn't bringing quite the ACLs over, right? Because we were talking NFS version 3. So we sort of have to do a little bit of work. This may make things like that a little bit easier, have those ACLs kind of communicate a lot smoother from, you know, other types of NFS storage as well. So performance improvements, monitoring environment, what happens when a DR event occurs and you fail over and you want to fail back, you know, giving you good guidance and the steps that you need to take there. And again, having those statistics, much like we've done in previous types of parts of spectrum scale, like Ganesha and the NFS monitoring we did, doing that within AFM. So having the command statistics available, having them available to Health, having that sort of flow into the GUI, and have that kind of environment to be easy for you to use. From a core, just doing, being able to do an MMLS NSD to, update what is the local read-only cache size that you're actually using. You can sort of see another highlight is really not needing to use the metadata block size for MMCreate FS anymore. Lots of heavy debate that we've had internally about that as well. But again, it's no longer really required for performance with a file when you have this file system format of 5.0. Again, that's the 32K, sorry, having a block size split is the sub-blocks of 32, right? We basically don't do that anymore. Really, the performance is really not, the gains that you were getting pre 5.0, really not necessary as well anymore. So really thinking about deprecating that feature now, or we are deprecating the feature. Other things in terms of, getting the state, look at the fully qualified domain name, clearing the quality of service configuration automatically when the file set that you're working on, it's deleted. So that, kind of a common sense. I had a file set I create. I have some QoS configuration associated with that. If that file set gets unlinked, deleted, I don't no longer need that QoS configuration, so I can move that away. Other core improvements. This is one of the things that I've been waiting for a long time, MMXCP. I think, like I said, we're felt well within the same cluster, looking at being able to have it work with a remote mounted cluster as well. But again, this really does, using ILM, Integrated Lifecycle Management, copy from one file system to another. So basically you do a parallel copy. Yes, lots of you out there have talked to me about, using PDSH or, parallel commands, so it's sort of those types of DSH style kind of commands or distributed shell where you can do parallel copies. And there are lots of utilities that sort of do that. We're using MMXCP. It will preserve the ACLs, the file attributes that are out there and bring those forward as well. And then also a new callback when the disk down is triggered. So really, if you have a down, why did this go down? Provide a reason. It's changed the status. A lot of the times, you were sort of seeing that and, would not get more information. Why did that disk go down all of a sudden? So you want to maybe do a query of a couple of commands that have, the event occurred. Let's go see what actually happened there. Windows support, again, we still do Windows in terms of spectrum scale and AIX, 4K disk sectors, and then again, using finally the spectrum scale supporting the use of OTemp file, which on open for the Linux kernels that are greater than 3.15. From a performance improvement, and again, we'll have a good talk on this tomorrow about what we're actually doing, right, in terms of NUMA aware where your I/O adapter is in terms to the processing that's occurring, and so you don't want to have a processor 1 send out to the adapter that's hooked up to processor 2, for example. So being more aware of how that kind of communication is there. I think and I hope and I pray that again just NUMA awareness is on by default when you install Spectrum Scale. It's one of those things that's bit me a couple of times a little bit last year where you deploy and like, why is the memory not working right? Well, NUMA's off. Turn NUMA on. So again, with the NUMA awareness in the I/O adapters and kind of memory, just sort of it should be there. Should help again. mmap performance improvements for prefetching files, and data blocks. So sort of looking at a lot of that in the reads. And again, there's going to be a great talk tomorrow. A lot of the performance handlers we've been doing. Finally, on Z, again, not many of you may see too much Z in your environment. I think it's just kind of cool to sort of talk about Erasure Code Edition, Spectrum Scale Erasure Code Edition, which we released in 2019, ISC, I believe. We sort of gave the initial environment. We're basically allowing you to put ECE on NVMe drives attaching to a mainframe. Now, like I said, it's just kind of cool to sort of see that software-defined storage nature, right? Work on x86 of Erasure Code Edition that we have partners that are out there today, like, HPE and Lenovo sort of doing this and others coming on board. We have, again, ECE on mainframe. So very, very cool to kind of sort of see this as well. Thin provisioning support on the DS8Ks that's out there. And again, OpenShift, container native storage access, CSI coming on mainframe, being able that all of that's going to work well as well in addition. Security improvements, we've now have IBM Security Guardian Key Lifecycle Manager. So it's not SKLM anymore, it's GKLM. sorry about the acronym change. Again, but you'll sort of see this out there. Is it SKLM or is it GKLM? It's the same thing. It's the key manager that we have here at IBM that we use for encryption. Performance monitor tool improvements to limit, connections. So essentially, who's able to connect to the cluster IPs. You can sort of, modify that list in the Zmon collector CFG file there. And then another thing from a security improvement, changing the file system name. If file audit logging is done, you essentially want to make sure that if it's enabled for the file system, that you're not allowed to sort of do certain things to that as well. So you're restricted on changing, if file audit logging is enabled, to change the file system name. The GUI and API changes. AFM, a lot of those metrics we talked about earlier are kind of being propagated to the GUI now. You can see, the read, the write ratios in AFM, sort of see the queues a lot better, and see that, and then better management of API encryption endpoints in terms of what's going on within the GUI as well, in the REST API. From this whole framework of monitoring availability and proactive service maps. So you have, we have GPU direct storage checks. We had to make sure we got those included. A proactive system health check to, so essentially if you want to get that feedback to IBM support for call home that you sort of use, you can have that there. And then again, looking at subcommands to do deletion of expired API keys is just to sort of do some cleanup as well. And as well as, again, commands to schedule data uploaded, the upload list for call home, right, to sort of see that as well. Finally, Erasure Code Edition, what have we been doing there? Yes, this is technology that runs in the Elastic Storage System. This is technology that can run on storage-rich servers as well. This is what can run on the mainframe that we just sort of talked about. So GPFS native RAID, that you're sort of doing that, lots of improvements there for larger log home B disks. We're changing it from 2 gigs to 32 gigs. Sort of be working on that. MMV disk, also being able to suspend node enhancements to avoid IO pauses while you're suspending the nodes, and other environments there. We've talked a little bit about larger recovery groups, enablement. We're sort of working towards that larger recovery group method where instead of it's 512, we can do a larger number. So a lot of that work is being integrated into the release in 5.1.2. We got a first pass at that. You'll get some more in the future. I believe we announced a couple of releases ago already support for a storage-rich server up to 40 disks already, so you can sort of see that as well. And then finally, like I said, we sort of wind down the talk, right? We do have our discontinued features that are out there. Just thinking about what is it. What do we recommend for you to sort of do in terms of older things that are out there, like TLS 1.0? Probably should not be using that at all. And storage enabled for containers. That was our previous incantation of that kind of container framework. And then iSCSI as a target for remote boot. That basically is discontinued now. We sort of announced that a couple of releases ago. Other things that are out there, again, older systems, older type of key management. So really just kind of cleaning up the cruft in other versions that are out there of software we work with. We talked about the metadata block size option that we're looking at, we are deprecating right now in terms of the need for sort of having that. And then again, still for those of you that are, using CNFS, or, a couple of folks still are, it's stabilized, right? Really, there's no real work that's sort of going into in terms of future work for that, but it's still there. Ganesha, the NFS kind of environment, is doing a much better job in terms of having that regular NFS v4.1 type of support, of course, of version 3 as well, in terms of the protocol environment as well. As always, if you have a request, we've got new product, management, that are here on board and listening. So log your RFE. It doesn't have to be public. You don't have to do that. You can log a private if you sort of, want to sort of have that there. But please, I encourage you, I've heard folks just like, well, Chris, you talked about mmap read. What about mmap write? Again, sort of talk about, various things that are out there, log the request for enhancement. This is your voice that you're going to get to us, here at IBM in development, that we'll do the right kind of prioritization workload on that. And C, now, like I said, with more quarterly types of releases, you might be able to get out there sooner, right? So again, log your RFE if it's out there, if it's not there as well. Past talks, I believe, like I said, I kind of winding down here in the environment. I want to thank you for your time. I'm sort of going to, we'll see if there's any questions as we sort of proceed to the next talk. I hope to see all of you real soon. If not, we'll see you on the next virtual call. Take care.
Thank you for that, Chris. That was interesting. So I've got a question about MMCXP.
Sure.
So if I'm copying a multi-terabyte file from one cluster, GPUs cluster to another, is it a single stream or does it chop it up into chunks to speed the process up?
Let's see if any of the development team is going to unmute themselves just in case before I chime in. So when it's doing the copy, right? So if you're doing a copy today, a POSIX copy of one file to another, right? It's essentially what MMXCP is doing. From one file system to another, so GPFS is going to start to copy that block kind of environment, over from the environment, one file system to the other. MMXCP is just basically doing that through LLM, right? So when you have these larger kinds of chunks, I believe right now what's going on, Paul, is it's taking the large file and it's just essentially starting to copy on it of that one large file. So that's not, I don't believe that is being parallelized in terms of the CP type of command, but I could be mistaken if anyone in development wants to chime in.
You are correct, Chris. It just calls CP to do the actual copy.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay. So thank you for that. Any other, I'm assuming we take questions now from the participants on your talk, Chris? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Like
we
there
can
are
take any question. Go ahead.
There are some unanswered questions. Yeah, no, there are some unanswered questions if you want to take any of those.
So that's been answered. All the questions on the side I see. Here we go. Right. So we have a question for the disk down event. Do we now have the path checker for multipath devices?
I think it's just showing that it's a disk down event, and I see Matthias is on as well. I don't know that it's just more on something that's maybe SAPS connected, or is this going to be like on Fiber Channel as well? Not. I'll get back to you, Renar.
Okay. Next unanswered question. Are there any news for support statement for GKLM 4.1.1.x release for scale?
It's just kind of is that the newest and greatest release? Because I know we had a lot of challenges with Vormetric and some of the various releases that were out there before, and we kind of decided not to go after one because it had some bugs. So I'll look at that as well, Bernard. And now that we pivot to the other talk, I can sort of look at some of these questions and answer them for you.
Okay. There's one question that's always close to my heart. When are you going to increase the number of independent file sets?
Oh, I think Wayne was jumping at the bit to talk about that, right? Soon, let's just say that much.
We are actively doing it. The question that we asked last time is, how many do you want? Split work is underway to increase it. We don't have a hard target yet. But if you could put into the chat a target number, that would help us.
So we'll answer the rest of the questions as we go through the next talk.